All right, we are starting or going back to chapter 10. We did some of chapter 10 earlier in the year with statistics when we did um, our first mini portion of statistics, but we are coming back to finish that piece up. So this is going to be chapter 10. For this whole week, we are going to be doing histograms for our first lesson. So this is going to be our lesson on histograms. Histograms are very similar to bar graphs. There are just a few minor little differences that I will share with you guys as we're going through the notes. All right, so a histogram is a bar graph that shows the frequency of data values in intervals of the same size. Okay, the height of the bar represents the frequency of values in the interval, but also the number of values in the interval. So let's say frequency, it's the vocab word for it. Then we can put a little arrow out and say that that just means the number of values that fall in that interval. Okay, what this means. This right here is a histogram. Okay, down here are our intervals. So 0 to 9. So this is talking about CDs owned. So maybe we ask the class, how many CDs do you own? Okay. And this is going to tell us the number of students who said, or sorry, yes, this is going to tell us how many CDs people own. So this is all the people who said 0 to 9 CDs. This is all the people who said 10 to 19 CDs. This is how many people said 20 to 29 CDs. And this is the number of people that said 30 to 39. Notice how these are all 0 to 9, 10 to 19, 20 to 29, 30 to 39. These intervals are the same size. It's actually a group of 10 because if you include 0, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which is 10 numbers. So each of these are 10 number intervals. And that's really big with histograms, that we have to have the same size for those intervals. Okay, the frequency is the height of that bar is going to tell us how many people said those numbers. So this tells us 4 people said that they own maybe like 2 or 4 or 5, any number between 0 and 9. 4 people had said that. What this also tells us is that for 10 to 19, 3 people had told us that that's what they how many they owned, and so on. Okay, so that's the height of the bar is going to tell us the frequency or the number of values in that interval. Okay, so this tells us how many times people said that interval. Okay, and remember, they weren't asked, like, do you have 0 to 9 CDs? They were asked, how many CDs do you own? And their answer just fell within 0 to 9. So, like, they said 0, or they said 9, or they said 2, or they said 4. Another really important thing with histograms is that we don't include, like, 0 to 9 and then 9 to 19. Because then if they said 9, they could be in either group. So we have to, if we do 0 to 9, we have to start with the next number in the next interval, 10 to 19. Then notice how it goes from 19 and then it goes 20 to 29. You can't have like 9 in both groups because then if someone said 9, you wouldn't know where to put them. Okay, let's just make another little note on these intervals. So they're equal intervals. And then another little note for histograms that the bars should touch. They should be right next to each other, whereas in bar graphs you would leave a space in between them. With histograms they should touch because you're going straight from 9 to 10 right in that next bar. There's no space between them. All right, so let's do an example of making a histogram together. So frequency tables are used to tell us what our data is. Okay, so it gives us the interval and then it gives us the frequency, how many people said 1 to 3. Okay, so the frequency table shows the number of laps that people in a swimming class completed today. Display the data in a histogram. So we have to first start off by making like that L shape. So we have like a Y and an X axis, kind of like a graph, so that we can put our intervals and then our frequency going up the side. So we're going to start off by just sketching like a little L shape. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. We do have to label it. So this going up the side is going to be our frequency. This down below is going to be the number of laps. That tells us right here, because these are intervals, and that is labeled right here. So this is going to be number of laps, and I'm just going to use the number sign instead of writing out the word number. If you wanted to write it out, you can do that as well. We are then going to put in our intervals. So 1 to 3, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here's our first one, and we label the space in between. We don't label the tick mark. So the space in which this bar is going to be is 1 to 3. Just like up here in our example, they labeled the bar 1 to 9, not this first line, or sorry, 0 to 9, not this first line 0 to 9. They label the space. So we need to make sure we are doing that. Then we put another one, and this is going to be 4 to 6. Notice how they didn't start with 3 because they ended with 3. They started with the next number, which is 4. Then we have 7 to 9. And I'm just getting all these numbers from this table up here. Looks like times. And then we have 10 to 12. And last but not least, we have 13 to 15. You could just leave this tail here, or you could erase it if you wanted your graph to look really nice. I'm going to use different colors for making these bars. You do not have to. I'm just going to do that to help you visualize as I am making this. Our frequency, smallest number is 0, biggest number is 11. So we're not going to count by ones all the way up to 11. I would say maybe let's count by twos. Okay, so my first tick mark will be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Technically, 11 is a pretty small number, so you could have counted by ones, but just with my handwriting and this pen, it's hard to fit. It would be hard to fit 11 numbers in that space, so I just counted by twos. One thing you want to be careful of is counting by too much. Like you wouldn't want to count by fives, because you would only have 5, 10, and then 15. You want to have enough numbers that it spaces them out, but you don't always have to count by ones. All right, let's make our first graph. We're going to do this one in red. So 1 to 3, set 11. So we'd make our bar up to 11. 11 would come in between 10 and 12. Connect it down, and we'd want to kind of just like shade it in. You don't have to shade it in. My next one is going to be green. So that was 4 to 6. There were 4 of them. Draw my line over, connect it down. You don't have to use that method for creating your bar. That's just what I've found helps me the most. Then we have 7 to 9 is 0. We do want to just draw like a line down at the bottom to show that we didn't forget about that space. There's just none there. We don't want to bring it up at all. We just want to draw right on that axis that there are 0. All right, then we have 10 to 12. It's going to be in purple. There's 3 of them. Go up to where 3 would be, draw a line across, connect it down, shade it in. Last but not least, we have 13 to 15 is 6. Find 6, draw a line across, connect it down, shade it in. All right, and that would be our histogram of the number of laps people in a swimming class completed today. All right, notice how we have our labels, we have our intervals, frequency, and then our bars are touching. Looking good. All right, here we are going to actually be making the frequency table and the histogram. Okay, because sometimes you're not going to be given this table and you're going to have to make a table yourself. Okay, so we're going to start with our frequency table. And we are going to find what our smallest number is and what our biggest number is so that we know like what those intervals have to start at and end at. So basically, remember, if we can think back, that's called our min is our smallest number and our max is our largest number. So our min in this table right here looks like it is going to be 29. Our max, our biggest number in that table right there, and we're not talking about how many times that number appears, we're talking about the actual number, is 57. Okay. So let's just kind of sketch. A frequency table is going to be like a T-chart. Okay, we've got our interval, which is points scored. I'm just going to put points there to shorten it up. And then we have our frequency, and I'm just going to put FREQ and stop it there to shorten it up. All right, so we are going from 29 to 57. And remember, you can always go smaller and you can always go bigger. You don't have to like start and stop at those exact numbers. So I would say let's count by tens and let's start at like 20. Okay, so the first interval would be 20 to 29. Okay, we'll just keep them in groups of 10. Remember, that is 10 numbers because if you include 20 and you include 29, that is 10 numbers. You can count it out if you don't believe me. Our next interval then would be the number after 29, which would start at 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 59. Now we can stop there because our biggest number is 57, which would fall in this interval. Smallest number is 29, which would fall in this interval, and we're good. You could have also counted by fives. 10 is usually a really good number to go for unless you don't have that many data values. But 10 is always the easiest, I believe. But yeah, you can always go by anything else as long as you're doing it correctly. There's really no wrong answer. There's better answers, but there's really no wrong answer other than counting by ones. That would be a bar graph. All right, 20 to 29. Let's go through each column and see if we have a number that's 20 to 29. There's one. We're just going to make tallies. There's none, there's none, there's none. So it just stays 1. Okay. 30 to 39. Here we have 1, 2. Remember, it includes 39. 3. So there's going to be 3 there. 40 to 49. We've got 1. I don't know why I circled that one. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 50 to 59, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now that we are done with our frequency table, we're starting like right about where we started for this one. So we want to start by making that L for the graph. Start by making that L. We want to label our axes. So we have frequency. And then down here we have points scored. We want to label those intervals. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. So you want to kind of divide this line into 4 spaces. Remember, when we divide into 4 spaces, that means there's 3 tick marks. We're going to label each of those intervals. If you don't ever have space to write it like this way, you can always write it like diagonally going up. Just gives you a little bit more space. Okay. All right, our frequency is from 1 to 7. So let's just count by 2s. Could have just counted by 1s, but again, my handwriting, it's very hard to write small on these pens. So we are going to just count by 2s quick. All right, again, I'm going to use colors. So for my 20 to 29, it's going to be a red bar. There's 1. So I go up to where the 1 is, draw my line across, shade it in. Then I'm going to use my green. For 30 to 39, I go up to where the 3 is, draw my line across. Oh, that was bad. Bring it down and shade it in. Then I have my blue bar, 40 to 49. There were 7 of them, so I go up to where the 7 is, draw my line across, bring it down, shade it in. Last but not least, I have 50 to 59. It's going to be my purple bar. I go up to where the 4 is, just kind of follow it along, shade it in. And there we have a histogram. All right, so that's going to be our examples on creating a histogram. Now we are going to learn how to read a histogram, or how to pull information out of a histogram. And that is going to be the last skill that we learned today. The histogram shows the winning speeds of the Daytona 500. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's a car race for NASCAR. So these are the winning speeds. So the speeds that people who won the Daytona 500, what speed were they driving at? Okay, is going to be recorded here. So down here are all of our speeds. Up here is how many drivers had said that. All right. So what that means is that I would say, and it's counting by 4, so this is kind of a tricky one. That's why I like to count by like 2s most generally, but these numbers got all the way up to 20, so they had to count by a bigger number. But it's going to be kind of hard to guess what number this is, but you can kind of visualize that this bar right here would be like 1. Okay. So let's just go down and see what the questions are asking us. Which interval contains the most data values? Okay, so the most data values, remember, is going to be like the mode. We learned about that in our statistics, which means which one has the most people who said that. So the highest frequency. So we'll be looking for our tallest bar, and it asks for the interval. So the interval would be 150 to 159 miles per hour. That's the interval that has the most answers, meaning that the most people who win the Daytona 500 are traveling between 150 and 159 miles per hour. That's pretty fast. How many of the winning speeds are less than 140? So we're going to look down here at our speeds, and we're at 140. We want less than 140. So think, are we going to be using the numbers up here or the numbers this way? We're going to want the numbers that are this way, because these are all the amount of people who said less than 140. All right, so we look at this bar. This bar goes up to 4, so 4 people had said that. We go to our first bar. Remember, I had said that's about 1, because if it was 2, it would be more in the middle, and if it was 3, it'd be closer to the 4. So this would be 1. So how many people had said that they their winning speed was less than 140 miles per hour? That would be 5 people. Okay, so we're just using that graph to answer these questions. How many of the winning speeds are at least 160? Remember, at least. So remember, if you have at least $160 in your pocket, you could have 160. So it includes 160. And the least amount is 160, so it's 160 and more. Okay, because if you have at least that speed, that's the least amount of that speed that you have. That's the smallest speed you could be traveling. So it could be 160 or more. So we're looking to see where that 160 is here. And we want the speeds that are 160 or more. So we want to know how many are going that way. In this first bar, I would say that that's, so the blue line is 8. So I would say that's 7, because if it was 6, it'd be more like in between 8 and 4. And this is closer to the 8. So I'd say that that's 7. And this last bar looks like it goes a little bit above the 4. I would say that that's probably 5. If this were a question like on a test or something, I would obviously accept 4 or 5. But if you look at it compared to this bar, which is exactly 4, it is a little bit taller. So you're going to want to just like use the graph, use the other bars to kind of guess. Most likely on a test or something, this would be see-through, so you'd be able to see that it's a little bit above that line. But so we're going to say 5. If you had said 4, don't like mark it wrong, because I could see where you would see that as well. So we'd have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 speeds are at least 160 miles per hour. All right, and that is it on a histogram. So if you want to take a quick minute to write your summary, you can talk about the difference between a histogram and a bar graph. You could talk about what you need in order to make a histogram, like a frequency table, intervals that are equal sizes, any of that we have learned today.